Honor thy father and mother. When I was thinking about what to write for tonight's sermon, I thought I should talk about Mother's Day since it occurred last Sunday. Then I decided that the fathers in the congregation get slighted because we don't have services in June. So our sermon tonight is about parents, mothers and fathers both. If the order of the Ten Commandments is any indication of their importance, God puts our relationship with our parents second only to our relationship with Him. The first four commandments tell us how to respond to God. The fifth one tells us to honor our father and mother. That commandment even comes ahead of the one telling us not to kill. In the case of the commandment, I don't think the word honor means only to respect our parents. I think it also means that we should yield to their authority when we are young and learn the lessons they have to teach us for as long as we have them. A child comes into this world knowing nothing except to respond to his instinctive bodily needs. Almost everything he learns in his first few years comes from his parents. When I thought about the lessons I learned from my parents, I found I had to divide them into two categories. The ones they intentionally and verbally taught me, and the ones I learned on a much deeper level. If the only lessons I learned from my parents were the verbal ones, I would be a very strange and interesting human being. Some of the things my mother took the time to teach me were how to properly cook dried lima beans, even though I've detested them all my life, and how to shoot the bullseye out of a target with a .22 caliber long rifle. She also made sure that no lady was ever properly dressed to go out in public without gloves and a hat. She made sure I understood that doors that I opened should be closed again because I was not born in a barn. She drilled into me so adamantly that I should never wear white shoes or clothes before Memorial Day or after Labor Day, that I still can't do it even though many other people do. And then there was the big one. Don't ever go out of the house with holes or pins in any of my underwear because, God forbid, if I were in an accident, people would wonder what kind of mother I had. Except for thinking that I should be able to handle firearms at least as well as Annie Oakley, my father didn't put much stock in the importance of lessons I learned from my mother, so he taught me some of his own. Thanks to his tutorage, I can change my own tires and oil, rebuild a carburetor, and diagnose whether or not a semi is running with the proper fuel-air ratio based on the appearance of the emissions coming out of its smokestack. He also made sure I knew how to mix up a mean batch of cement anytime I needed one. Most importantly to him, he made sure I understood that buying a Ford could do nothing except guarantee me a life of misery and woe. So how did I come out of that household without being totally psychotic? It was the preparedness I got by learning from my parents' examples of how to properly live one's life. From watching my mother and father, I learned that God and my elders were to be loved and respected, even when I disagreed with them. I learned that the dead were not to be forgotten. I learned that I have a moral obligation to offer help to anyone who needs it because I often saw my father stop to fix a stranger's car stranded on the side of the road, or my mother feeding the hobos who wandered in off the tracks that ran across the back of the property. And both of them donated blood religiously every 2 months because someone they didn't even know might need it. I learned that television was usually an insult to human intelligence because my father got rid of ours 6 months after we got the first one. Books, however, were so revered that we had to wash our hands before we were allowed to pick one up. I learned if you told someone you would do something, you did it, no excuses, and you did it the right way. I learned that animals were always to be treated with love, care, and compassion because my mother fed them and tended to their wounds, even if they weren't ours. I learned from watching my World War II veteran father that duty to God was the only thing higher than duty to country. He never told me that. He lived it. And I learned from my mother that when it is our time to die, we should do it with faith, courage, and dignity, even if we think we are too young to go and don't want to. My parents, just like everyone else's, had their faults, but they made me what I am by the lives they lived, and I am grateful to them for that. As I have gotten older, I realize that our image of God is usually based very closely on our image of our parents. We hear about God the Father, but it is much too abstract for a child to process. So he substitutes the only parent image he understands for his image of God. That is an awfully heavy responsibility for a parent to live with. and I'm glad I never thought about it when my own kids were small. Raising kids is scary enough without knowing that they are deciding what God is like by watching us. As adults, we know what a God who was just like us would probably be a really bad idea, but our kids don't know that. Most of us have already raised our children to adulthood and are now enjoying our grandchildren. God's reward for surviving our kids. And my personal note, grandchildren are God's reward for not choking your kids to death as teenagers. We've done with the hard part, and we can look with pride at the fruits of our efforts. If you can look at your kids and grandkids and like what you see, be proud. Pat yourself on the back and know that they are that way because they spent a lifetime watching and imitating you. Happy Mother's Day and happy Father's Day to all of you.